You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Every year, roughly 1 in 5 convenience stores and a growing list of their supplier partners participate in an industry-wide event known as 24/7 Day to celebrate the communities that they serve. We draw enormous media attention and essentially no negative comments. It's pretty easy to use, and we're going to talk about that today. So joining us is Stephanie Sikorski. She heads up the NACS Foundation, which is the group that spearheads 24/7 Day, which is held every year on July 24th, now in its 6th year. Thanks for joining us today, Stephanie.
Thanks for bringing me on.
So I could do my description of 24/7 Day, and you could probably do an even better one. So I'll let you take it away and just describe to everybody what 24/7 Day is and why it matters to them.
So it's our industry signature event, and it recognizes and celebrates first responders in our community. And that definition has grown to include everyone from medical and emergency professionals, certainly as we navigated our way through COVID, Red Cross volunteers, 911 emergency responders and dispatchers. So it's a way for us to say thanks to those who show up in times of need and also those who are helping to keep us safe so that we don't have those emergencies that we have to respond to.
So I saw an interview with you where you were talking about how 24/7 Day got its genesis. And it's basically, and we probably should say, it is July 24th. And if you pretend you're European for a minute, 7/24, flip that around. That's July 24th, 24/7. That's why that day is selected, but also because that's around the time that hurricane season starts to ramp up. And of course, one of the big things that Red Cross and first responders do is have to help folks out with natural disasters and various other things that the Red Cross addresses. But you were quoted as saying that one of the reasons that we came up with 24/7 Day was to celebrate 24/7 operations, because for a lot of people, nothing good happens after 0 dark 30. So it's a way to celebrate in the community, but it's also a way to reposition the industry as a positive force in that community.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's one of the hardest things I know for your role, for my role. It's great when you see the positive headlines, you want to lead into those. It's hard to look at the ones that are negative. And I think we got tired of having to respond to those or in some cases wish that they weren't written. And this was a moment for us to say, are we ready to reposition? But more importantly, are we ready to reframe that narrative? And is there a different way that we could talk about 24/7 operations? And certainly there's the work as we're talking about for first responders, but there's also the work that we do from the convenience and fuel retailing side in 24/7 operations. And unfortunately, our operations oftentimes were met, like you said, that nothing good happens after 0 dark 30 and that we're responsible for all of these things that could be viewed as negative. And we said, well, what if we talk about the things that happen because we're open 24/7? What if it's about that, medical personnel, whether it's a doctor, nurse, or other, that's finishing their shift or starting their shift, and we're the only place open for a cup of coffee? And certainly that was often the case during COVID and continues to be the case now. What about those that, as you talked about, for hurricanes and tornadoes, or it's a wildfire or snowstorm? And often it's our parking lots that are the only thing that's available to basically set up a ground zero. And certainly as consumers and just, public facing, it's sometimes the place where we have to go where it's the only ATM that's open or the first or last place to fill up for gas. And we don't talk about that enough. We talk about the other headlines. And so again, 6 years ago, this was an opportunity for us to celebrate both first responders in our community, but also to highlight the work that we do in our industry as really first supporters to those first responders in many cases.
I mentioned that the celebration is July 24th, or celebration, that's the official day, but We have, and I mentioned at the outset that roughly 1 in 5 convenience stores participated in just 5 years. In just last year, our 5th year, about 30,000 convenience stores, 70 or 80 different brands, and just remarkable growth.
It's amazing because I think that would be the case, right? You have this vision of what you believe that it could be and that you're trying to do the right thing. And it's about a celebration and a recognition of two things that you know personally to be true, right? And that is that first responders certainly help to protect our communities, and that convenience stores are great first supporters, as we just talked about. But sometimes it's difficult to share that and hope that everyone sees the same vision. And when we first started, it was Sheetz and Wawa and Racetrack that said, I can see that vision too. And now, as you talked about, 6 years later, we're looking at having another record year event.
One of the reasons that it's grown by leaps and bounds year after year is the foundation, the NACS Foundation, makes it pretty plug and play to move things forward. And I think, when you have something that is a super positive story to participate in, and you make it easy for someone, you're going to find people are going to jump on board. Can you describe how retailers use the day and what they might look to do? And we have a month and a half for them to say, hey, I want to do this too. How is it made as plug and play as possible so they can execute pretty quickly?
Yeah, we tried to do that. Speaking for myself, it's a lot easier to do it when someone hands you something that's pretty ready-made. And in this case, we didn't want to make an event that's supposed to be celebratory and to recognize those that are doing the right thing and doing great things for our communities. We wanted it to be more about growth and participation and growth and awareness. And if we added too many restrictions, we knew that was a surefire way to make sure that we weren't going to get there. So for this, we created what we've internally talked about is almost our Swiss cheese version of everything, meaning that it's got the easy to fill in holes for folks. So we provide the press release that participants can use in their own communities. We provide radio spots, emails that can be used for sending out to local first responder communities, or even with their loyalty program participants. We also create all of the social media graphics with each participant's logo in there. So again, a lot of times people don't have teams or agencies. They might be a team of one or one person that's, wearing several different hats. And this is just a great way to make sure that it's visually easy to see that they're a part of the program. It helps to strengthen our voice as an industry to show that, it's not someone else that's out there. It's the convenience industry that's saying thank you as a group, even if it might be hyper local efforts. And then as far as the offers, for some, it's been a cup of coffee. For some, it's been a fountain beverage. There are others that have signature food service programs, and that's everything from ice cream to tacos to chicken tenders. And then in some cases, folks do canister programs with American Red Cross, or they might provide a lunch to their local fire station. So there truly are a number of different ways that folks can get involved. Our role is not to say what folks can or can't do. It's to say, in what you choose to do, make sure that it's unique to your company and it's authentic to your brand. And most importantly, it's authentic to your community.
I mentioned that you oversee the NACS Foundation. That's one of the hats that you wear. You also oversee marketing, and as part of this group that you work with, you're involved with looking at the PR behind it. And last year, I believe this is like a inside baseball term, media impressions, which means a number of things that are potentially read. What is the potential audience that something, and that's the way
That's right. Like how many eyeballs saw it, right?
Yes. And double it by 2 because 2 eyeballs, right?
I like your math. We'll use
Yes, yes. So it's twice as good as the way I'm defining it, but roughly 1 billion media impressions. And for the second straight year, not one negative one, which I think speaks to the power of heroes and community.
It is a rare occurrence when you can post something, especially when you have 70 plus different brands all participating with different offers in different parts of the country and recognizing various first responders. And I think what you just hit on is the proof in terms of when you've got something that's real and when you've got something that's working, to be able to have that sentiment all positive just speaks volumes to the authenticity, I think, of what we're trying to do. And that is just a simple act of kindness, which seems few and far between sometimes as you look at headlines, but it's just a simple act of kindness. And it's proof that it doesn't take much, and it comes in a whole lot of different forms. And there's no ask of folks to have to pay to be involved in it. There's no ask of folks to commit to anything other than simply saying thank you.
At the outset, we talked about retailers. We also talked about a growing list of suppliers in the supplier community that are joining with the NACS Foundation to celebrate 24/7 Day. Can you give us an overview of how that plays out in 2024?
Yeah, so we've had a number of folks that have reached out to us, and same thing as the retailers. It's usually that's really interesting. And once we give the background of how we started, the opportunity for us to reframe that narrative in terms of 24/7 operations, and then the fact that we were willing to provide and do a good portion of the heavy lifting, it's hard to say no for that. And in many cases, when we did the research, 7 years ago or so, it didn't matter whether you were a retailer or a supplier, a single store owner, had thousands of stores, where a manufacturer or even state associations, as an example, most folks are playing in what we called several different buckets or pillars. And response relief was one of those. So there were folks that were already doing great things in their communities. We just weren't talking about it. And when suppliers started to come to us, it was, hey, I really like the idea of the program. We do a lot already, but how do I get involved at the local community level? Or how can I help support my retail partners? And we've had folks that have done offers where it might be for a fountain drink or coffee and they get another food item free, or perhaps the coffee or the fountain drink might be free. And that's one example of a partnership. Sometimes it's been check donations as well. Others have been promotions to where a certain proceeds or a certain portion of the purchase goes to fund scholarships or others in the case, one example. And so it's been great to see how these folks have come on board, how they've tried to think outside of the box themselves. One that we're engaged with right now is exploring the idea of a blood bank with American Red Cross and giving each participant a coupon to be used at a local convenience store. So it's again, just a great way for us to expand the reach and the way that we can say thank you.
Want to talk a little bit more about the potential for good PR. A billion media impressions, certainly pretty impressive, but we're kind of just tapping the surface, if you will, of what is doable with media relations. And I know with a lot of retailers, you want to start by winning the day by getting them early. Get them for breakfast, then maybe you get them for lunch. Maybe you get them later on in the day. With the media, same thing. And the best way to drive media coverage is with that morning news show, whether it's the national one or whether it's local ones. And we've heard some good stories in the past, how you can perhaps bring that story to your local market with the morning news team and celebrate heroes, celebrate community. And it's a good way to start the day.
I think it's a great way to start the day. It's not just with the media relations. It's a great way to start the day with your own employees too. having them wake up and know that they're a part of something bigger for their communities, and in a way still greeting their customers, but greeting a different type of customer in a way that they get to say thank you. Being able to do that with a smile and to see the impact of doing something that's as simple as a beverage or as simple as that food donation, it's great to see the engagement and to hear from retailers as an example that had no idea the impact it was going to have on their front line.
Do you have any favorite stories from the last couple of years of just something that's like, wow, that shows what this program's all about?
I think one, as we touched about, was from retailers, and I've heard this from a few of them that might have had coffee programs as an example that they've been doing every single day for years to first responders in uniforms, and yet having their team members that were so impressed with the effort on 24/7 day and thinking that this was something that was brand new. So it was a way to engage and hear from the employees that they loved to be able to see that the company they were working for had heart and being able to say thank you. I think the others for me are, especially on 24/7 day or leading up to it, scrolling through social media, you get to read a whole lot from different folks that are just simply saying, it was so nice to see my wife or my husband recognized. Thank you so much for the work. Oftentimes saying thank you so much for the work you all are doing in communities as well. And that was a second aspect that we didn't think that we would see. And it wasn't something that we were trying to do as self-serving. It purely was to say thank you to one community. And as a result, that same community was also thanking us. And I think that's pretty special.
What's the next thing for somebody listening that says, I want to do this? Is there enough time? And are there examples where retailers have done things pretty quickly and pretty well?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had folks, last year, as an example, we had individuals that were reaching out to us the day before. And because we've got these plug and play toolkits, we just handed over the assets. We were able to give them templates that they could email, that they could use across their channels. So yes, it may not feel like it gives them as much time to engage in the way that they'd like to, but it just takes a start. And this program is not about getting things perfect. It's about doing things perfectly authentic. And I think having folks that want to jump in, and whether that's the day before, whether that's the day of, I would much rather, I'll throw out a little Canadian term, but I would much rather see that snowball happen to where we pick folks up, and each year we just get stronger with our message and stronger for what we can do together as an industry, and more importantly, what we can do together for our communities.
So what is the next step that somebody needs to take to get involved?
There's a few different ways. They can certainly email me directly, and I'll make sure that we've got that information so that listeners are able to go to the site. They can also go to the site directly. The easiest one to remember is 247day.org. So that's 247day.org. And that gives all the details about participating. It will give the details about who's already come on board and what those offers are. But that's an easy one to participate. And if folks feel like they haven't got a chance, they can certainly use the hashtags if they jump on last minute. There's a hashtag for 24/7day as well as convenience cares. And like I said, if it's not exactly how we would want to do it with them for this year, we can at least scoop them up and make sure that they're part of that early on with us for next year.
Well, Stephanie, thank you for joining us. Sounds like another great year in year 6 in taking it from 3 to 70, 80 brands and growing.
Yep.
So congratulations on
over 30,000 now, but thank you.
Thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.